Welcome to the Expert Series, brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America. Our health education team is here to bring you experts in lupus to discuss topics to help you live better. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. My name is Alyssa, and I'll be your host. I am very excited to welcome Stephanie Slan, who will help us discuss the importance of participating in clinical trials. Stephanie, the project director of Impact Plus, or Improving Minority Participation and Awareness in Clinical Trials, an Office of Minority Health grant-funded program. Stephanie comes to the LFA most recently from the Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri, where she served as the Infectious Disease Research Team Manager. In that role, Stephanie led a team of over 20 clinical trial professionals as they worked with AstraZeneca and Pfizer on the COVID-19 vaccine clinical trial. Stephanie spent over a decade working at the Medical University of South Carolina in a variety of research-related positions. While working in the Division of Rheumatology, she oversaw lupus clinical trials, managed clinical research operations, coordinated day-to-day study activities, and co-authored multiple lupus research publications, among many other responsibilities. We are delighted to have you here today with us, Stephanie. Okay, let's jump into these questions. Question 1, what are clinical trials and why are they important? And in this answer, could you potentially go ahead and explain the phases of clinical trials, who can participate in them, and the benefits of participating?
Definitely. So clinical trials are research studies performed in people that are aimed at evaluating a medical, surgical, or a behavioral intervention. These are the primary way that researchers find new treatments, new drugs, new diet, or medical devices such as a pacemaker, and whether or not they're safe and effective for use in people. Often, a clinical trial is used to learn if a treatment is more effective, less effective, has increased or decreased side effects as compared to standard of care treatments. There are 4 phases of research trials, and each of them have different focuses. A phase 1 trial tests the experimental treatment in a small group of often healthy people, between 20 and 80 individuals, to judge the safety and side effects and to find the correct dosage of the medicine under study. A phase 2 trial uses more people, between 100 and 300 individuals. While the emphasis in a phase 1 trial is safety, the emphasis of a phase 2 trial is effectiveness. And this phase will aim to obtain preliminary data on whether or not the drugs work in people who have the certain disease under study. These trials also study the safety and short-term side effects of the medication under treatment. And these typically last a couple years. When that phase is complete, phase 3 starts. And this is where we gather more information about safety and effectiveness and study in different populations and different dosages, using the drug in combination with other drugs. So, for example, they may have a new lupus drug that they would add to already standard care that you would get. This study typically has around 3,000 to 5,000 individuals, and if the FDA agrees that the trial's results were positive, it will approve the use of that experimental drug or device. Phase 4 trials typically go for longer periods of time, 10 years sometimes, and they just look at the effectiveness of the drug, the safety, and are monitored in large, diverse populations. Sometimes side effects don't become clear until the phase 4, which is why we continue to follow individuals once they've already received FDA approval. So some deciding factors for who can be included in a study and who can't. One depends on the phase. Like I said, phase 1 typically has healthy volunteers. So those would, in this instance, be people who don't have lupus, but may be the same age, race, and sex of our lupus population, so that we can study what these drugs do in the non-affected population and the lupus population and make those comparisons. We can fine tune what the dosage is going to be, how long people are prescribed the medication, and things like that. Other things that are taken into account for who can participate and who can't is whether or not this treatment is looking for a specific grade of disease, whether the person has kidney involvement, heart involvement, maybe that they're early in their diagnosis, maybe they're later in their diagnosis. So the inclusion and exclusion criteria weigh heavily on the type of trial, but that's something that should be discussed with the patient and their care team. Some benefits in participating in clinical trials would be that you're helping to push medical research further. I mean, you're coming in and rolling up your sleeves, as it were, to help other patients and potentially yourself. Oftentimes, studies are giving you the latest and greatest treatment and the new treatment as well. And another benefit is that not only will you be under the treatment of your regular doctor, but you'll be under the treatment of your study team. So between your research coordinator, your study nurse, and your primary investigator, you have a large team of individuals who are looking at every side effect, every improvement of your condition. So I think for patients that clinical trials is a very good option for trying something new to see if you can improve your disease state.
Awesome. So it sounds like anyone who is included in these trials has a good team around them. Should they have any questions? So what other information should people with lupus know about participating and deciding? And if they, where can they go if they decide to participate in these trials?
Excellent question. When participating in clinical trials, you should have as much information as possible to make an informed decision as to whether this trial is going to be good for you as an individual. You should also have ample time to discuss any questions or concerns about participating in a clinical trial with your doctor, your nurse, or your research coordinator. And they should be able to answer all of your questions before you're expected to sign your consent form and begin treatment. Some questions you may want to ask are, how long is the study going to last? How many visits am I going to have? Am I going to have to stop my current medication to be in this trial? And is it safe for me to do so? You can find clinical trials for your disease state, your diagnosis, and your particular symptoms on clinicaltrials.gov. That's a great way to find out what trials are going on. All research done in the United States has to be on that website, so you can see if there's not something in your area, perhaps there's something available to you somewhere else in the country, or maybe you can reach out to those doctors and express that you have interest in participating, but the trial's not available at your site, and maybe that'll help to spur movement to another site and opening up the trial for better access for more people. Another way that you can find trials that you want to participate in is by using RAY, which is Research Accelerated by You. It's our lupus data platform where people with lupus and their caregivers can share information about their lupus experience, which will help researchers accelerate the development of new treatments and improve disease outcomes. You can be a ray of hope and ensure a bright future for lupus research by sharing your lupus experience.
I know there's a lot of, sometimes there can be some stigma around clinical trials, especially for communities of color. Can you explain the importance for people with lupus from these communities for participating in these trials? And then can you explain Impact Plus's role in this research for people with lupus?
Definitely. So clinical trials with a diverse selection of patients are essential for the development of new and more effective therapies, and especially in populations of color. Unfortunately, minority populations have been and continue to be systemically underrepresented in lupus clinical trials. Specifically, a review of the years 1997 to 2017 found that Black or African Americans made up 43% of lupus cases nationally, but only 14% of participants in lupus clinical trials. The need for more racial and ethnic diversity amongst lupus clinical trial participants is pressing, as there continues to be a high level of unmet medical need for this patient population. The Lupus Foundation of America proposes to conduct the Minority Participation and Awareness in Clinical Trials for Lupus project to drive increased recruitment and retention of minority populations in lupus clinical trials. The Impact Plus project will also build upon work from previous projects that have been funded by the Office of Minority Health. Diverse representation in clinical trials is essential for the development of new, safe, and effective therapies. For example, the incidence and prevalence of lupus is more than 3 times greater among Black populations than white populations. And in some studies, we found that Black and African American lupus patients are more likely to have organ system involvement and more active disease and lower levels of social support when compared to white lupus patients. And to successfully address these barriers, we will use a collaborative approach involving partnerships with trusted community organizations. Research has shown that the importance of collaborating with organizations that share common interests and reach diverse audiences is needed to achieve outcomes that neither of them could do by themselves. So to address this, we're using nurses who play a critical role in everyday lupus care, and we're educating them more on clinical trials and how to talk to their patients about being in lupus clinical trials. We at the LFA have years of experience in conducting outreach, education, and training to people with lupus and their families, healthcare providers, and other stakeholder groups. So this program is designed specifically to target populations of color and help to inform them of what a clinical trial is, how can they participate, and what kind of questions to ask, and just to be a better steward of the information that we get from these research projects.
And would you say that would help combat someone's fear in order to participate in these trials?
There's a lot of stigma around research in general. We know that there are several cases where researchers were less than ethical, and a lot of the methods that they used are no longer in use. One famous example is the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, where men were exposed to syphilis and then not treated by their doctors because they wanted to look at the course of the disease over time. In fact, these people were discouraged from getting treatment, and some individuals who joined the military and would have gotten treatment were bounced back to Tuskegee by these researchers because they wanted to see what would happen. Even after an effective treatment was available, they still didn't give it to those patients, and that's completely unacceptable. That has led to a lot of myths and misconceptions around clinical trials, like, for example, that people are going to be human guinea pigs. I really dislike this terminology because as a research participant, you are doing just that. You're participating. You're a part of your care team because it's your decision to participate. Anytime you're in a study and you no longer feel comfortable with being in that study, you can take yourself out of that study at any time. If you no longer feel that this is going to be a safe outcome for you, then it is imperative that you share that with your research team because it's their job to protect you from any unnecessary harm. Another myth that people have about clinical research is that if you're going to get a benefit, your doctor won't tell you. That's not true. A lot of studies, especially ones that have a medication that's being tested, will what they call blind you and the doctor to what kind of treatment you're receiving. This way, researchers know that there's no bias being shown to this patient. Some of the biases that happen are unconscious. So in an effort to keep those from happening again, we blind the participants. So your doctor may not even know if you received the active drug or a placebo, which is a sugar pill often. Some other myths is that you might lose control of your personal health data. This is not true. We do our very best with the amount of information that we're collecting, and this information could be your height, your weight, your blood pressure, your medical history, and sometimes even genetic information. But as a part of the informed consent process, you'll receive all this information and all the details about what type of information is collected, how it will be used, how it will be shared, and how it will be protected. Additionally, we have institutional review boards that are designed to ensure that the research is being done in an ethical manner, in a manner that doesn't cause additional harm to patients. If there's ever a point at which your doctor finds that this medication is not working for you, this treatment is not ideal for you, they may stop your treatment on the clinical trial so that there's no more harm caused. While we are in a scientific process trying to figure out new treatments, new behaviors, new things that'll help with our lupus patients, we have to first understand that number one thing is to first do no harm. Doctors take that oath when they become doctors, because why would we create more harm? The goal is to improve people with lupus's lives and help them to live more active lives, better, and have better quality of health as well.
And you went over my next question, so I really appreciate that, about the myths surrounding clinical trials, because that can, breed to a lot of misinformation, and we don't want that. We want to be able to have people with lupus get the care that they need, and one of the ways to do that is participating in trials.
Exactly.
And so, kind of leading into the next question, and you've mentioned this before, how can a trial affect a person's regular lupus care? And, do they have to coordinate with their rheumatologist?
So sometimes trials can have a very large impact on person's regular lupus care. Some studies require that you come in on a very regular basis, so maybe once a month, when you typically only see your rheumatologist every 3 to 4 months. This is something you should definitely ask when you're being introduced to a clinical trial. And additionally, it's very important to coordinate your care with your rheumatologist. They should know that you're on a clinical trial, so that if there's any changes in your symptoms, your lab work, that they can confer with the principal investigator on your research study and to work together to make sure that you're getting the best care. Additionally, sometimes there are drugs that are not allowed on a clinical trial because they can confuse the data. So it's important that your rheumatologist is aware of that, so they don't prescribe that, or maybe they can make a decision to use a different medication that's allowed by the trial, or perhaps your disease has progressed to the point where you shouldn't be on that trial. So it's going to be very important that you share your symptoms, side effects, how you're feeling with both your rheumatologist and your study team.
So it sounds like if someone with lupus participates, they should keep a journal, and
definitely,
and use that to help communicate with their healthcare team.
I definitely suggest that lupus patients keep a binder of all their information that comes with their health. So you'll get a copy of your consent form if you decide to participate in the trial. Keep that with you. Share it with your doctor. Share it with your nurse when you see your rheumatologist. Make sure that every time you feel something different, that you, like you said, keep a diary so that you are being an active participant in your own care. I think it's rather empowering as a patient to be able to help your doctors make decisions that are going to be the best for you. You don't have to take a back seat and just listen to your doctor. You can help them to make your decisions as well.
And so, kind of coming here to the end, what is the outcome in participating in these clinical trials? And then also kind of what is done with the information once the trials are over? Is this information like destroyed for personal reasons, or is just some of the non-identifying information kept just for reference?
So yes and yes. After the clinical trial has concluded, typically a paper is written and published, and then reviewed by peers in the field so that other researchers, other doctors are aware of what these new treatments are, new behaviors, new interventions available for their patients with lupus. Additionally, after a certain period of time, and that depends on your institution and what the requirements of your institutional review board are, but that information is retained for a number of years. When it's no longer needed, it is destroyed. So your information stays protected and stays private. When publications are written and shared, that information is completely anonymized and everybody's information is kept together, again, to protect the privacy of people's information. Publications in journals like the New England Journal of Medicine is a very, common publication that news outlets typically report from. Sometimes press releases are done, whether it's with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, or, Lupus and Science publications as well, to let the world, know what the product of this research study is. I think that there's been, in the last couple of years, a greater push to letting communities know what the outcomes are of the studies that they participated in. We asked people over and over to come volunteer for our studies, and we weren't doing such a good job as researchers of letting them know what we did later with their information. So there's definitely a push for more dissemination and inclusion of patients, their families, and other stakeholders in our community, nurses, medical assistants, to help make all of those clinical trials better, to make them less burdensome on our participants. So it's always a process of improving, and letting our community, our colleagues know what our research found, and letting our participants know as well.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for your time today and talking to us about clinical trials. For those listening in, you can find more information on lupus on the National Resource Center on Lupus by visiting lupus.org/resources. You can also find more information dedicated to this topic in our show notes. For the latest information on lupus and COVID-19, please visit lupus.org/coronavirus. To listen to additional episodes of the Expert Series, you can visit lupus.org/the Expert Series, where you can also subscribe to get alerts when podcasts are released. And if you wish to speak to one of our health education specialists, you can go to lupus.org/health-educator or call 1-800-558-0121. And finally, to connect with others with lupus from all over the world, Lupus Foundation of America invites you to check out our online support community, Lupus Connect, where you can talk with others, find emotional support, and discuss practical insights for coping with the daily challenges of lupus. You can find the community at lupus.org/resources/Lupus Connect. Thank you and have a wonderful day.